you need a Xanax. Israel, due
Yeah, I'm
to
sorry.
the West Bank,
30,000
what they did to
Palestinians have been
Gaza,
ruthlessly slaughtered by the
gives
Israelis.
the
Little
land so
upset.
that it
Let me ask you one more time.
Ooh.
Do you believe
Piers.
what happened on October the 7th was a justified act of revolution? Yes or no?
His audience's reaction is in his head now.
This is one of my problems,
No, I want to
actually.
hear if Emily condemns
No,
the
no,
actions of
Hassan,
Israel.
you
Why
will
don't you ask
please
her
let me
about that?
moderate the debate.
Why don't you ask her about
I don't condemn
30,000
the
people?
idea.
I've got two
I condemn
panelists
the
here who've not
fact
had a
that on
word
October
yet.
7th,
Because you're a fucking
kidnapped
Please
terrorist.
stop
civilians from their
talking.
homes. And I think you're a terrorist.
Please.
Come on, Alec, just say free Palestine one time. I've been waiting for you, Piers Morgan.
You tried to conduct a serious
You know-
interview with Crackhead Barbie?
This is the statement from Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine, put out on October 12th, apparently written on October 9th. Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine stands in full solidarity with Palestinian resistance against over 75 years of Israeli settler colonialism and apartheid. Palestinians have been, again, this is on October 9th, okay? Full solidarity, okay. Have been subjected to the longest ongoing military occupation in modern history, and their right to resist is enshrined in international law. Yesterday was an unprecedented, this idea of like right to resist, it doesn't, there's no international law about do whatever the fuck you want. That's why whenever you have these legal analyses of fighting between Israel and Gaza, people will say, even Amnesty at times will say, that when Hamas fires rockets indiscriminately, that is not a right under international law. You're not allowed to use weapons that can't be aimed, right? You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to take hostages. You're not allowed to kill civilians. You're not allowed to target civilians. Yeah, you're not allowed to. There's quite a few things that Hamas does, like basically, or you're also, there's a legal issue about like co-locating your military infrastructure and your military apparatus and your military personnel amongst civilian areas and not having adequate protections for your own civilians if you're going to war. You're not allowed to do that either. So there's lots of things that Hamas does that is not enshrined in international law. But anyway, yesterday was an unprecedented historic moment for the Palestinians of Gaza, who tore through the wall that has been suffocating them in one of the most densely populated areas on earth for the past 16 years, an open-air prison blockaded by Israeli soldiers via land, air, and sea. Despite the odds against them, Palestinians launched a counteroffensive against their settler colonial oppressor, which receives billions of US dollars annually in military aid and possesses one of the world's most robust surveillance and security apparatuses. Any omission of this context, any rhetoric of an unprovoked Palestinian attack, is shamefully misleading. It's interesting that they would say that, and you can make the argument that obviously it didn't, like, the history didn't start on October 7th. That's a pretty clear thing to put forward. I don't know why they would say that. Where's the omission? Why is there an omission on why supposedly that Gaza was turned into an open air prison or suffocated, or why there was a blockade, or why the blockade conditions of Gaza were the way they were, and why they were different from the West Bank? Well, the reason is because Hamas, even before they took formal power with the elections and the, what'd you call it? The preemptive coup, because obviously Fatah and the US were trying to coup them, and then they were like, no, you. Even before they had power in Gaza, like before they seized full control, they had a lot of influence on the Strip, and they were already using their institutions in the Strip, especially like mosques and other civilian buildings, to stockpile weapons, to prepare attacks, to build bombs, to import weapons from countries that supported them. The blockade didn't come out of nowhere either. But okay, it just like, if you just read this, it sounds like it's like a random choice, just like a random act of cruelty. And some parts of the blockade are absolutely punitive. There are some goods that were blockaded that had nothing to do with security needs, because Israel's whole thing is that if someone threatens them militarily, they will respond disproportionately, because that's their way of sending a message to anyone else who tries to join in. But it's not like all of it was punitive. Stopping concrete from coming in because they know that it'll be used to build tunnels, or stopping secondary materials that can be used to build rockets, like that was a security measure. They wouldn't have done that if they hadn't had the security reason to do so. So it's just weird that they would. I feel like, but then people will say, well, they were only doing that because Israel did something first before, and then it just goes back way to the beginning. But I think a really good way to word this, ironically, this whole thing of like who started it, or who's actually the one responding to violence. Because if you're pro-Israeli, a pro-Israeli will usually say that basically every military conflict between Israel and the Arab world started because of some Arab aggression, right? 48, the Jews accepted the partition plan. The Arabs said no. There was a civil war, which was instigated by al-Husseini and later by the surrounding Arab countries that invaded Israel. So they would say that, and they would also say that during the Arab revolt, they were responding again to attacks from Arabs, even when the formation of the Haganah, what they would say was because of a response to Arab rioting. But there's an alternative way to look at that, which I think is really interesting. And ironically, it comes from Ben-Gurion. So this is from Righteous Victims, by the way. In 1938, against the backdrop of Arab rebellion against the Mandate, David Ben-Gurion told the political committee of Mapai, when we say that the Arabs are the aggressors and we defend ourselves, that is only half the truth. As regards our security and life, we defend ourselves. But the fighting is only one aspect of the conflict, which is in its essence a political one. And politically, we are the aggressors and they defend themselves. I think that's a thing that people often miss out, because even before Balfour, even before Herzl, when Zionists were building settlements under Ottoman rule, they were attacked. Not very often, but they were attacked. And then they became more militant. And then they felt like they had to build settlements near existing settlements so they could fortify their positions and so that they could have a more robust security apparatus. And then eventually, as you got into the British Mandate, they decided that the best way of them to defend themselves was to respond disproportionately. So they would get attacked and then they would respond out of proportion, because that would be their way of sending a message to other people not to attack them, because people who weren't involved in the conflict would get caught up in it. That's basically their gist. But the Arabs were fighting against a political aggression. They were fighting against an aggression of that territory was about 90% Arab, or more than 90% Arab, and out of nowhere, in 1917, a foreign imperial power decides that on this land, where the population is 90% Arab, we're going to allocate at least some of it to a Jewish state. And they're like, whoa, we weren't informed of that. Like, what the And then obviously that starts to take place throughout the Mandate. And they, in tandem with having very horrible leaders, decide that one way to do it is violence against both the British and the Jews. So, but that doesn't take away from the fact that regardless of how problematic or unethical that was with the way that they basically founded a Jewish state on land that was already lived on by other people and basically necessitated some level of frustration of that local population, including, not to mention the mass expulsion and transfer of them. But the fact is that now, today, what happened. A lot of it was really, really horrible. And now, today, it's something like just under, or maybe slightly over now, about 80% of Jewish people in Israel were born there. I don't know how responsible they can be held for the terms by which Israel was founded. They are a national group. They're there. And because they're there, they're not going anywhere. The Palestinians aren't going anywhere. It just doesn't make sense to view like their entire existence, which is what this post is already doing, as an act of aggression. Just because the foundation of Israel was on very, very harsh terms, I don't think that necessarily justifies what an invasion into Israel proper. For what? For what goal? To capture territory? They didn't think they were going to capture territory. To to take out military installations? Well, they didn't really. They went for kibbutzim and a festival. They went for a couple of military bases, but it was mostly civilians, kibbutzim. What was the goal? And it seems like the goal of Hamas is still to destroy all of Israel. And it's like, well, is that really like a noble cause militarily to try and destroy Israel? No, because there are lots and lots of civilians in Israel who that's the only country they know. They were born there. They live there. They're not going anywhere. So the only way you're going to get them out is either by killing millions and millions of people, or even just like hundreds of thousands as a part of a massive ethnic cleansing campaign, or you just kill them all. I just don't really understand. There's such a massive incoherence with this uncritical support for any militant action from Palestinian leadership or Palestinian organizations like Hamas, because there is clearly some levels of action that help. The First Intifada put Palestinian struggles on the world stage, and it pushed Israeli leaders and Israeli leftists towards the peace process. It convinced Rabin of the peace process. Like, it convinced him that occupation couldn't last forever. But going into Israel's borders and just killing whoever to take hostages and starting a war that you know you're going to lose militarily, because at the very least, if a bunch of Palestinians die in the tens of thousands, then you get to win propaganda points, I guess, which is what Hamas leaders have said. Hamas representatives have gone onto Channel 4 and the like and said that they're actually winning this war because the civilian death toll is making Israel look really bad to its allies. But is that really something you should support? No, of course not. And this level of like uncritical support is just so, it's kind of gross actually, because at the end of the day, the people who suffer, at least in part because of Hamas's decisions, unless Hamas really didn't think Israel would do anything in response to October 7th, which is brain dead, then the people who pay the price for this quote unquote resistance that's apparently legal is Palestinian civilians. Anyway, we invite you to look at the detailed Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, and Amnesty International reports on Israeli apartheid. To those who are now calling for peace, we ask, where were you during the Great March of Return in 2018 when Palestinians in Gaza peacefully protested and were shot dead by the hundreds? Also, again, that's like the dishonesty here is so like, most of the protesters in the Great March of Return were peaceful, but that's not why the gunfire started. The gunfire started because a small group of militants crossed into a previously agreed buffer zone and were throwing Molotov cocktails and incendiary balloons over the wall and trying to break through the border fence. They were trying to destroy the border fence. And you can say the IDF reaction was insanely over the top and it was insanely disproportionate, but at the end of the day, now that we know what happens when the Gaza wall gets broken down, it's like, I don't know why you would ever frame this as a peaceful protest, because either you acknowledge that there were, that the violence here erupted because of violent aspects on the protest side. Why wouldn't you just say it was a violent protest that was justified? Like, anyway, where were you when Israel indiscriminately bombed Palestinian civilians in Gaza 2008, 2012, 2014, 2021, 2022? Again, no understanding of what indiscriminate bombing means, okay? Where were you this year when Israel killed over 220 Palestinians over the past 9 months alone? Where were you as settlers kicked people out of their homes, arbitrarily imprisoned children without trial, and brutally oppressed an entire population? You are not asking for peace. You are asking for quiet submission to systemic violence. How do you know that? Again, like, I feel like people who call for... I'm guessing this person is probably not a fan of two-state solution. Okay. As long as you perpetuate this narrative, fighting will continue to break out until justice is achieved, because nothing else is working. As Columbia students, our classes regularly discuss the inevitability of resistance as part of the struggle for decolonization. We study under renowned scholars who denounce the fact that the media requires oppressed peoples to be perfect victims in order to deserve sympathy. Yet, not only does our institution neglect to align its actions with its ostensible values, but it actively normalizes Israeli apartheid and subjugation of Palestinians. The strawmanning, if you're going to say perfect victims, we'll talk about some of those renowned scholars in a minute. I don't think not killing civilians is much to ask. I don't think that's saying be a perfect victim. Targeting civilians, I don't think that counts as I don't think. I'd imagine there's a bit of a gradient between a perfect victim and an organization that targets civilians. I feel like somewhere in the middle there's probably some medium. And again, leaders of the First Intifada realize this. People from like the local leaders, not the ones in Tunisia and shit. Like local leaders in the First Intifada very much held this position that when they were advocating for people to use non-lethal means, like they had guns, they had stockpiles, but they explicitly told people not to use them, at least the non-Hamas people did. They literally said, try not to, like, don't use means that are going to kill people. And the reason for them doing that was, at least in part, because they wanted to, first of all, to not cause like a disproportionate reaction that resulted in massacres, but also because they wanted to portray an image. They wanted to portray an image of them as David versus Goliath. And you achieve that image much more effectively when it was literally like kids or teenagers throwing stones at people with guns versus suicide bombings in the Second Intifada, where it was just them going into densely populated areas full of civilians and blowing themselves up. So if even in the past, Palestinian activists can learn to be like, can manage their impressions in order to deserve sympathy, I don't know why you would neglect that idea now, especially when international opinion clearly matters, but okay. We wholeheartedly condemn the email sent by General Studies Dean Lisa Rosen-Metch on October 8th that exclusively sympathized with Israeli soldiers who uphold the occupation, obfuscated Palestinian resistance as terrorism, and refused to acknowledge any of the hundreds of Palestinian casualties in the past 48 hours, let alone the overall context of the past 75 years. Okay. Apparently it's obfuscating to call October 7th terrorism. Okay. We condemn the October 7th email from Barnard Dean Leslie Greenidge, that extended support to those affected by the violence and loss of life in Israel, without even mentioning Palestinian suffering once. We condemn the fact that Colombia uses our endowment to invest in Israeli companies that violate international law and profit off of the construction of illegal settlements in Palestinian land. We condemn that former President Lee Bollinger unilaterally and anti-democratically overturned a student referendum to divest from these companies in 2020. And we condemn Colombia initiatives that normalize apartheid by sending students to the region when Palestinian members of our university community are barred from doing the same. From the 2020 dual degree program with Tel Aviv University to the recently announced Global Center in Tel Aviv. We call upon newly inaugurated President Minouche Shafik to step up and divest from Israeli apartheid, end the dual degree program with Tel Aviv University, and cancel the opening of the Tel Aviv Global Center. We call upon our administration as a whole to start verbally acknowledging Palestinian existence and humanity. Columbia students and affiliates, we invite you to sign this open letter and to join us at 4:30 p.m. on Thursday, October 12th at the Low Library steps to protest our university's complicity in Palestinian oppression. We further request that you individually email our administration to call out their hypocritical statements and blatant disregard for Palestinian trauma. It is on us to change the status quo and achieve justice for true, lasting peace. Continue raising awareness, pressuring our university, and expressing solidarity. See you Thursday. Signed, Students for Justice in Palestine and Columbia Jewish Voice for Peace. Okay. And their demands are apologize for the emails, divest to the Tel Aviv University, cease partnership. Okay. Again, I will say they're allowed to do this. I think they have a God-given right to protest this, even if this article is incredibly stupid, but yeah, they have a right to do it. Anyway, let's see. I don't necessarily agree with all these calls for punitive measures against students being cringe. Obviously, if they're harassing or assaulting people or intimidating people, that's a different story. But this is just, unfortunately, part of the student experience, you know? Okay. So, apparently, Hasan spoke about this protest on Piers Morgan. Oh, by the way, sorry, I will say some easy conclusions to draw out from this. This is at the very least Hamas sympathetic, if not completely pro-Hamas, this statement, like the idea that they keep on using euphemisms like resistance or like fighting back against colonizers in reference to October 7th. Like that's so stupid. Yeah, at the very least it's that. And also probably not interested in any form of peace that doesn't involve the destruction of Israel. I'd be almost 100% on that one. Okay. Hasan on Piers Morgan. This thumbnail, by the way, this thumbnail is incredible. Look at that. What the fuck? Who's this person? What? Okay, let's see.
Well, the war in Gaza has incensed communities across the world. Many Jewish people say they don't feel safe on the streets of Western cities. Many Muslims feel the horror facing innocent Palestinians is treated as a second-class concern. And as with any emotive cause, A lot of people with no dog in the fight have moulded this crisis into a familiar battle of good versus evil, oppressors versus oppressed. Hysterical scenes at some of America's top universities this week have generated more coverage and commentary than the war itself in the last 2 weeks. Columbia says that all in-person classes are now cancelled until the end of the semester. Arrests have been made at encampments outside NYU and Yale. Well, one notable Jewish professor at Columbia shared a video of Muslims praying as if it was a shocking assault on US values.
Yeah.
Many badly informed pro-Palestine demonstrators, meanwhile, have called for an intifada and chanted, "We love Hamas." Others believe that synchronised dancing is a long-lost secret to peace in the Middle East. Well, these people are all spending $80,000 a year on tuition, but clearly many of them haven't found Wikipedia, and this virtue-signalling fever is now emboldening a growing number of people to confront public figures. There's simply no connection to
Piers is so fucking funny, man. There has to be a virtue signaling woke whatever. Okay.
Oh, this was New York Mayor Eric Adams, berated for supporting genocide as he took his seat on a flight.
Are you Eric Adams? Yeah, you! You support the genocide in Palestine. There are homeless people all over New York. You're always partying. You don't actually care about the citizens of New York. People cannot afford food. You keep cutting the education budget so you can fund the police.
And this so-called performance artist has dominated timelines for days after achieving what previously seemed impossible, an outpouring of public sympathy for Alec Baldwin by doing this.
You're putting innocent people in jail, Alec Baldwin. I'm so sorry. Free Palestine, Alec, just one time, and I'll leave you alone. I'll leave you alone, I swear. Just say Free Palestine one time. One time. One time. One time, Alec. You know he's a criminal. You know he's a criminal. Come on, Alec, just say Free Palestine one time. Israel, Zionism. Please say it. One time.
Could you do me one quick favor?
So does any of this make a difference? Are these demonstrators forcing the rich and powerful to confront and condemn the horrors of war? Or is it a wave of self-indulgent protest, just distracting us from the deadly serious realities of a grim ongoing war? In a moment, I'll debate all that with Hasan Piker, Emily Austin, Esther Cracker and James Barber. First, I'm joined by Alec Baldwin's antagonist there, who calls herself Crackhead Barney. Well, welcome to Uncensored.
Hey, Piers! I've been waiting for you, Piers fucking Morgan!
Okay.
I wore my diaper today for you, Piers. Do you like it?
Not particularly, no. Do you want to sit down?
And Piers, can you bring me to Buckingham Palace? I would like to meet the Queen.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I'd really like to meet the Queen.
I don't think the Queen, if you mean Queen Camilla, she is probably tied up with royal engagements at the moment. If you meant the Queen who died...
Well, get me in, Piers!
Yeah.
Get me in, Piers! I want it!
Okay. Can I take you back, if I may, to what you did to Alec Baldwin? Can you explain why you did it?
What did I do to Alec Baldwin? Piers, do you see the damage that Alec did to me? Do you see the damage? Look at my arms! Look at my arms, Piers!
Well, it's on YouTube, so of course I can watch it. What are you talking about?
My neck! I was maimed by a white man on Monday! You're telling me what I did?
No, you weren't maimed by Alec Baldwin on Monday, were you?
I was maimed!
No, you weren't.
My hand is broken! My neck is broken!
No, it's
my
not.
Legs! Look at my legs! My legs don't work! Look at this! Piers! Piers, are you another white devil? Piers Morgan! Don't do this to me, Piers! It's too early in the morning, Piers! Piers, it's too early!
Not the wig.
Your wig's come off.
It's not a wig, Piers. It's my hair. I'm a white woman. I identify as a white woman.
Let me ask you seriously, if I may, for a moment, because you're trying to make a serious point.
Well, I want to know, is this person left wing or right wing? Because saying fuck Zionism does not put a lid on that question. Doesn't put that question to bed.
I presume with Alec Baldwin. He was getting a coffee. You run in, you call him a killer.
I was getting a coffee too.
Okay, but you decided to...
I was getting a coffee
okay,
too.
You don't have to shout at me as well. We can have a civilized conversation.
Okay, waste of time.
Podcast of James Barr. Well, Emily, I mean, on one level, I guess it was quite funny, but on another level, I didn't like what she did to Alec Baldwin. I've got no truck for Alec Baldwin whatsoever. And I think with this case that he's got hanging over him, I hope that justice is served, because ultimately he did fire the gun that killed that poor woman. and has been on some kind of weird PR tour ever since. But I don't like to see any public figure, whether it's Eric Adams, the mayor, on a plane, or Alec Baldwin getting a coffee, harangued and harassed in that manner. Now, I tried to conduct a serious interview. She obviously wasn't interested in doing that, wanted to turn the whole thing into...
Really? The person whose only impression you have of is her going up to Alec Baldwin and saying, "Give me a fuck Zionism, Alec Baldwin of Zionism." Really? You're like, I'm really disappointed that I brought her onto my program and she just wouldn't deliver an articulate argument for her actions. Like, you brought her on because you wanted a bit of a clown show, Piers Morgan. Like, we know you like it. That's why you always bring on retards like Rabbi Shmuley on and because that's the content that you want. Come on, just own it. Come on. Content brain Pierce. Own it.
To a foul-mouthed rant and joke and performative thing. Fine. That's entirely her right to do it. But what did you think of these harassings, not just by her, but by other people, of public figures?
You tried to conduct a serious interview with Crackhead Barbie?
Well, no, I was asking her about a viral video of her harassing Alec Baldwin, which I do actually think is a serious thing. I do actually think public figures should not be harassed in that manner. I've had a bit of it myself, and I think it crosses a line, right? And Alec Baldwin, as far as I'm aware, has not said anything particularly sensational about the war at all. So why she is harassing him in the street in the way that she did, I think is worthy of examination. Now, as it turned out, she had no interest in having a serious conversation. Okay, so we've cut it off. But I don't think I should be blamed for getting on someone who is literally at the centre of a quite big news story in America for harassing a famous star. Do you, Hasan?
It was for clout. She was doing it for clout. That's why she went on the show also, for clout. Which
Hasan, he knows. Me and Hasan, eh? What did I say before Hasan even spoke? Same thing.
You were correct on pointing out that using the ongoing ethnic cleansing campaign in Gaza and what's happening to the Palestinian people as a vehicle to create more social clout for yourself, social capital for yourself is pretty disingenuous, pretty messed up.
I have to jump in there, though, because isn't that what everybody's doing? Isn't that what this show is also doing? Because you're talking about is create political clout, to create noise,
I'll come back
to get clicks, to make money.
Listen, let's not all be disingenuous.
No,
right?
but the whole conversation, and actually Crackhead Barney isn't that different to you.
Well, actually,
and Crackhead Barney said it herself. She said, we're no different. And I kind of agree with Crackhead Barney. I didn't think I'd say it.
If you think there's any correlation between what she just did on the show...
Someone screaming over someone and not letting them speak. Right. There's definitely a correlation.
Well, you think that I've treated you like she treated Alec Baldwin?
No, I'm just saying that I think that actually you aren't that different. You're trying to do the same thing.
I've come back to that.
You're just doing it in a different way.
No, it's a preposterous suggestion. I do not do what she does.
Hey, this guy knows as well, right? That's why that's why he's just got the same conveyor belt of the fucking dribbling Avengers, like Rabbi Shmuley. Oh God, who else? Who else is on his regular cast of Israel-Palestine heads? There was Patrick Bet David. Finkelstein, obviously. Well, we got like Abby Martin, Dennis Prager. Yeah, it's not exactly like jank. How many jank appearances have we had? He just screams and calls Jews calls Israelis bloodsuckers and shit like that. I don't know. Or bloodthirsty is the word he uses. Which I don't know. If I was Jewish and I heard him saying that about that feels kind of slight overtones there.
That's right. But Hasan, here's the point I would make to you. A lot of people think a lot of these protesters at universities in America are performative. The ones who are chanting their support for Hamas, the ones who are chanting about intifada and pretending it's not about a violent uprising. I mean, do you accept that a lot of that is not only performative, but public demonstration of support for terrorism?
Absolutely not. I don't think that. I mean, all protests are technically performative, obviously, but there's a very clear-cut goal for the group of students at Columbia and many other universities. I was in Melbourne not that long ago, and I attended a Palestinian protest there, a Palestinian rally there, and the students there were also demanding the exact same thing, that they divest, their colleges divest from a lot of the companies that are aligned with the state of Israel, a lot of the companies that are directly involved in operations in the West Bank, a lot of the companies that are playing a role in the regular maintenance of the apartheid regime of Israel and helping Israel conduct an ethnic cleansing campaign. That is the ultimate goal. That is why they're trying to very clearly cause a little bit of a disruption and engage in.
But are you comfortable?
It is true that their goals are clear. They have a point there. The goals are clear. They're not like there's not much ambiguity about those 4 goals. The rhetoric is snaky as and basically suggests that every Israeli civilian is a legitimate target, and no act that Palestinians commit against Israelis can be taken off the table, because otherwise that's basically like trying to call them perfect, trying to turn them into perfect victims. But yeah, these are all clear. So yeah.
Okay, but are you comfortable,
the most American thing you can do?
Are you comfortable with the ones who are seen chanting support for Hamas or chanting about Intifada?
I am perfectly comfortable with people chanting about the Intifada. As far as the Hamas thing goes, any kind of protest is always going to have a litany of random people, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. You have to look at the actual tangible goals that the protest movement is stating they're interested in.
Well, that's a little bit sneaky, Hasan. It's not just like random people that the Hamas support. Where do you think these people are drawing their Hamas support from? Could it be? We looked at a list of some of these people who were educating at Columbia University, or if they weren't actually working for the university, they were invited in to give talks at the space that they were occupying, because that's often what happens. When students do protests and they do sit-ins and all that, they will sometimes invite lecturers and all that to just give them talks. And to one of the people who was involved in this was a guy called Joseph Massad, who, again, on October 9th, or is it October 8th, wrote in the Electronic Intifada that the sight of the Palestinian resistance fighters storming Israeli checkpoints separating Gaza from Israel was astounding, not only to the Israelis, but especially to the Palestinian Arab peoples who came out across the region to march in support of the Palestinians in their battle against their cruel colonizers. Now, I don't really know if you would ever describe a majority civilian population that was targeted, remember, the fighting that Hamas had with the IDF happened later because the IDF actually got involved and separated themselves from the civilians. But before the IDF showed up, Hamas were running around kibbutzim towns and festivals and just gunning down whoever. Are those people the cruel colonizers? Okay. This, like, you can look at this whole article if you want. This is a pro-Hamas article, like, through and through. And we also had, this person doesn't teach at Columbia University, but he was giving talks. He was invited to give lectures there, this Danny Shaw guy, who on October 8th was saying that the oppressor has no rights the oppressed are bound to respect. So again, after the main targets of Hamas's offensive were civilians. I wonder which oppressor he's talking about there. Just every Israeli? Oh yeah, what is it? The Zionists are straight Babylon swine. We need to protest their neighborhoods. Why are you racist, arrogant bullies? Zionism is a mental illness. It's a genocidal disease. Yeah. Babylonian swine. Gosh. A Zionist, the most despicable form of a human being, greedy, selfish, racist, exclusionary, anti-Jewish, anti-Muslim, anti-human, anti-indigenous, fully support. Jesus Christ. Like, the language and the tone is just so, I don't know, especially given that the majority of the world's Jews will fall under the category of Zionism. They would fall under that definition because whichever country you look at, wherever there's polling, UK Jews identify, in the UK, it's, what is it, like 8 out of 10 British Jews identify as Zionist. That's from 2023. US Jews, sympathy, Israel, I think it's like 6 in 10 or something. Oh, it's Jewish connections. So you have to kind of acknowledge that there is a Venn diagram there. When people say it's not anti-Semitism at all, it's just anti-Zionism, you're kind of ignoring the massive overlap between being Jewish and being Zionist. 8 in 10 US Jews say carrying out Israel is an important. 8 in 10 say caring about Israel is an essential or important part of what being Jewish means to them. Nearly 6 in 10 say they personally feel an emotional attachment. Yeah, I don't know. So when you hear this language about the despicable form of human being, greedy, selfish, like, no wonder you're going to have anti-Semitic overtones. Like, obviously. Who else was there? There was this guy. I think this guy is... Oh, what's this guy's role again? Mohammed Abdu, doctor, visiting professor of modern Arab studies. He did a panel in Columbia University that was recorded. By the way, I don't endorse these guys, these Visegrad people. They're weird. But this is just them recording the lecture. And his Facebook around October 11th, again, this guy is probably one of the most incoherent academics I've ever seen in my life, which is up against some pretty stiff competition. Yes, I'm with the resistance, be it Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad, but up to a point. Oh, what point? Given ultimate differences over our ethical, political commitments, that's the difference between a strategy and tactic too. How do we stand in solidarity with Wumexen in Iran refusing the hijabs while being critical of a neoconservative cis-hetero-Islam, the mullahs, and at the same time adopting an anti-imperialist interventionist stance that counters attempt to divide Iran as Iraq before it along sectarian and ethnic lines? So he's also all for Hamas, Hezbollah, and Islamic Jihad, with the caveat that they don't respect women's rights or gay rights. This he's probably one of the most incoherent people I've ever seen. Like, this whole thing. He has this whole theory that the Palestine struggle actually began in 1492 with the conquest of Islamic parts of the Iberian Peninsula. And I'm just like, bro, how did the Iberian Peninsula become Muslim territory? What the? Why is it only imperialism or colonialism when it's done from Europeans? But apparently, like, the Muslim conquest that happened 700 years earlier that resulted in Muslim rule over North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula, why was that? Apparently that's not the struggle. You know, that empire was legit, apparently based. Okay, weird, very weird. Or no Ottoman Empire either, just Columbus and the conquistadors. That's when the Palestinian struggle began. Okay, bro, okay.
And I think that those goals, and I think you will agree with me on this, Piers, I think those goals are pretty valid overall. I think that they want to, one, recenter the attention to the genocide that is ongoing in Gaza, and two, demand that their tuition dollars do not go to operations in Israel. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a campus. There's going to be a sister campus that is being built in Tel Aviv right now for Columbia University. This means that Columbia University, which once housed the likes of the late great Edward Said and many others, and that currently has many Palestinian students who pay tuition for projects such as this one, will not be able to go to that sister campus. I find that abhorrent, but it's everyday existence in Israel.
Let me bring in Emily. You've been listening to all this. Your response?
With all due respect, Hasan, why do you feel that Columbia, or any college for that matter, owes you to divest from Israel? Why do you think your opinion is correct? Because so far, I heard the classic buzzwords: apartheid, discriminatory, ethnic cleansing, and genocide, which is funny because it's all the exact opposite. So if I may ask you, what about Israel is apartheid? You also just said the students in Israel, the campus in Israel would not allow Palestinians to join. Are you
Again, well, obviously there are Palestinians in these universities is what she's going to say, right?
confused, or do you know nothing about the country of Israel? Because let me remind you, Jews are not allowed in the West Bank and Gaza. However, Arabs have full Israeli citizenship, have the rights, are members of the Knesset, which is the equivalence of, you can think of Congress, and even prosecuted a former Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, an Arab judge. So,
you know, in Ehud Olmert, okay. Do you know in the 2000s, there were Arab Knesset members who were supportive of Hezbollah, who made like pro-Hezbollah statements after around the same time as the Israeli withdrawal. I think they're like full-on Islamists in the Knesset. Yeah.
what apartheid exactly are you speaking about? What genocide? What ethnic cleansing? And secondly, how dare you say it's okay to talk about an intifada? Let me remind you, the intifada last time it happened in Israel consisted of thousands of people dying in bus bombings. So are you saying that you support terrorism and killing innocent people?
Whoa.
Well, intifada simply just means revolution, and I'm an American, and in 1776,
Violent.
we did one of those. And it was pretty good. Yeah. What do you think? The American?
Okay,
do you think
well, we're talking about suicide bombings there, though. Surely you can caveat a little bit, Hasan. I don't. Okay. I wish there could just be a little bit more nuanced understanding of like the intifada and shit.
We also bombed Hiroshima. We also bombed Hiroshima.
Don't. Yeah, I know, and that was also unjust and unimaginably cruel. But of course, the Israel Defender is also defending nuking civilians and killing them by the hundreds of thousands. Now listen, let's get back.
But when it goes
let's
against
refocus the conversation to the points that you made. Let's refocus the conversation to the points that you made.
Okay, look,
you said,
just to remind everybody, I'm actually moderating this, but that's an interesting point that Emily just raised, Hasan. It does seem that you're very selective about the violence that you support. That when you support it, it's justified. When other people use things in a violent way that you don't support, it's unjustified.
But everyone holds this position, though. I'm pretty sure people would say that like Nazi violence against Poland and Czechoslovakia and the Jews was unjustified, but the violent response to end Nazi rule was justified. Everyone believes that some violence is justified and some isn't. Holy. If we're talking about intifada, why wouldn't we just focus in on what does intifada mean to different people? Is it really the wisest thing to call for, given how horrible the last one was, not just for Jews and Israelis, but it was also really bad for Palestinians. Loads of Palestinians died in the second intifada, and the peace process got completely railed. Like, But no, now we're just going to be like, so you think some violence is okay, but some isn't? Well, yeah, of course you moron. Yeah, everyone thinks that.
Seems like it's all skewed to what Hasan Piker thinks.
Well, not necessarily just what I think. I think that there are obvious markers, obvious boundaries. I don't think violence against civilians is justified.
Okay.
I have talked about October 7 on this very same show, saying that it was a tragedy. It was atrocities that occurred on October 7 specifically. When you target civilians in any capacity, I think that that is unacceptable. However, this does not mean that violence will not occur in many circumstances. Violence has occurred in every single revolutionary action, many good revolutionary actions. Obviously, America bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki with an atom bomb, that was not a very good
Hamas did on
moment
October
for
the 7th,
anybody. It was not a very good moment for human civilization at all.
Was what Hamas did on October the 7th? Was what Hamas did on October the 7th an example of what you would call a justified revolution?
I'm just Hasan is his audience's reaction is in his head now. That's what happened there. I'm a body language expert. That's exactly what happened there, okay?
Of what you would call a justified revolution.
I don't look
or it's a delay. I don't give a
at every single act of violence. I look at
You've literally just been reciting a whole load of them.
Systems of oppression.
Why are you avoiding October the 7th?
You do it too.
No, I don't.
I'm not avoiding it. I've talked about it a million times over.
Let me ask you one more time.
This is not what we're here to discuss.
Emily, hang on.
This is not what we're here to discuss.
Let me just ask you directly one more time. Let me ask you one more time. Do you believe what happened on October the 7th was a justified act of revolution? Yes or no?
I do not, and I do think that. Oh, wait, hold on. That's let me clarify. Let me clarify something very important here. Events that unfolded on October 7 were atrocities. That much is clear. Those atrocities could have been avoided if Israel was not an apartheid regime. Israel has been an apartheid regime for 75 years.
Can you answer how Israel's an apartheid regime?
In the
because
early,
you keep repeating that.
No, you can't just chime in. You can't just chime in. You ask me a question. You want it.
Why
you ask me a question. I'm going to give you.
Just to be clear, Hamas wants all of it. Every now and then they'll say they want a two-state solution, and then I've noticed as well. I'm not falling for this anymore. When Hamas leader comes out and says, "I'm for," first of all, the more common thing they'll do is they'll say, "We're in favor of a Palestinian state in the 67 borders." They won't say a state of Israel. They'll just say a Palestinian state. That they won't recognize Israel, just like springboard idea. But what they sometimes do is sometimes they will say two-state solution. But when they do that, when a leader from Hamas says that they're pro two-state solution, other leaders at the same time or within a few months will say, we're actually not for a two-state solution. And when a leader says that they're for the two-state solution, they will never go any further than that. They'll never do anything like, they'll never do what the PLO did, which was when they formally voted to repeal the anti-State of Israel parts of their charter. They'll never do that. They've never done that. Their first charter is still there. It's never been formally renounced. It's never been formally amended or changed, like despite the propaganda efforts of 2017. They've never gotten rid of that. They've never actually formally sat down to and voiced approval of any particular agreements that, like the PLO did with the quartet agreements. They've never accepted terms like, say the PLO had terms like they were going to renounce terrorism, or they were going to recognize the borders formally, or there was going to be like a mutual recognition thing. They never did any of that. They just go, one leader goes on TV and says, we're for a two-state solution. Yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, sure. And then another leader, like a month later, is like, two-state solution, off, river to the sea, dick. That's not a serious endorsement of it. So point being, it's not, Hamas didn't do October 7th because of Israel being an apartheid state. Hamas did October 7th, and it seems to be quite pledged to violence as long as Israel exists. So, Mr. Niagara, thanks for the $5. Piers Morgan content is doing an intifada on my cognitive capacities. This discussion's actually all right.
An answer.
Because you're repeating
Israel
these lies.
has been an apartheid regime
ahead,
since
please.
its inception. Until 1967, Israel was an apartheid regime for the Palestinian citizens of Israel, the Arabs, as you called them. There was a two-tier.
They were under a military rule. Yeah.
Criminal justice system. They were subjected to military court processes and not the civil court processes until 1967. After 1967, they got citizenship. There are obviously still many different social issues that pertain to the Palestinian citizens of Israel, the Arabs that are living in Israel, those who are not Jewish, of course. However, Israel currently is occupying the West Bank. There are more than 2 million Palestinians that live in the West Bank. Israel is illegally occupying the West Bank. There are checkpoints. There are license plates that restrict Palestinian travel. The Israeli operations in the West Bank have destroyed Palestinian statehood. Now, of course, all of this is readily available for those who want to learn about it, yourself included. I hope you look it up. B'Tselem is an Israeli human rights organization which declared Israel to be an apartheid regime in 2021, in the April of 2021. Amnesty International declared Israel to be an apartheid regime.
Before I move...
It's also, Hamas were, even when there was a campaign for a two-state solution, which would have ended the apartheid, it wouldn't have been apartheid with two states. But Hamas were rejectionists. They literally suicide bombed people to disrupt that process. So it's so weird saying that October 7th wouldn't have happened if only Israel stopped the apartheid. I don't think Hamas's problem is the apartheid. Hamas's problem is Israel.
Hang on. Before I just want to bring in our two British panelists here, but just finally, just to clarify, Hasan, I can't quite work out whether you said you do think October the 7th was an unjustified act.
He said he doesn't. I think he said he doesn't.
To revolution, or whether you changed your mind. So can you clarify?
I think that violent means of maintaining an apartheid is inevitably going to yield violent retaliation.
So was it inevitable? That's not. He's having a. You would look so much better as well. You just say no. Of course I don't. I don't support attacks on civilians. That's stupid. Doesn't help anyone. Done. Let's talk about systemic issues and pre-October 7th and 75 years. Let's talk about. You'd have a much better, clear path to do so if you just answer the question and then continue on from there.
Was it justified?
Something that is completely avoidable.
Was it justified?
Civilian deaths are never justified.
You know what, Hasan?
Hang on, Emily.
You look Hirsch Goldberg Poland's mother in the eyes. No, you look this person's mother in the eyes and you tell him that this was justified. You tell him his arm being blown off and being held in captivity for 200 days is justified.
I do love that the Israel defender...
This is the perfect opponent for Hasan. Just this soy screeching shithead. Like, just holding up the pictures of dead people. By the way, there are like 30,000 dead Palestinians who can have their pictures shown up. And people to say, oh, you think this is okay? You think it's okay that Israel, military operation, genocide? Like, come on. Come on, just... I feel like Piers is doing a really good job of keeping Hasan on the ropes with a question, but then she has to jump in to get her. Oh, God.
No capacity to fucking hear anything I'm saying.
Palestinians who are made of identity.
It just... If you're not going to respect me
You
and
think
listen
that
to what
we
I have to say,
occupied
which, by the way,
you
of course
think
you
we've
don't
occupied
respect.
Gaza.
Oh, if you talk
Look what
over each other,
happened.
nobody can
I'll just
hear
keep
you.
speaking
I just
What do you
over
mean
you.
I
That's what
think?
you
It's
do.
not
I just
I
want to
think.
give
It's not I
Hasan-
think. It's the entire
Hasan,
world knows.
No, it is you
Okay?
think.
It's the
It's
entire
only
world
things
knows.
that
Emily,
promote
please.
your narrative.
Let me handle this, Emily. Hasan, just before I come to the two
Let me
people
handle
who are
this,
with me
Emily.
here, I just need some clarity here because it seems like you're dancing around whether you think October the 7th was justified
Why are we
or not.
doing this? Why are we doing this back and forth masterbation? I've already given you my
Piers,
fucking
why are you
position.
doing this?
I'm
He's
sick and
happy.
tired
It's
of
Jews
repeating it
being
over and over
killed.
again.
Okay, I just
But I think it's okay. It's only okay to do it. I will say, if you say, "Oh, do you think conservatives are justified?" If someone asked me that 3 times, I'd think they were an absolute dickhead. Like, because I'd probably answer it properly the first time and then be like, "Chill, fuck, I've told you." But it just seems like maybe they didn't hear Hasan say, "No, I do not." I think he said that. But obviously, the way to make it look like masturbation is if you just give a clear answer repeatedly. So then it looks like he's just asking a question more and more times for no reason. The only way Piers repeatedly asking it works is because you're not too sure how to answer it. And it's kind of funny.
Ask
Jews,
this,
it's okay.
ask this
Emily, stop
demon next to
talking.
me
Group, it's
wearing
Emily,
a fucking
come back
IDF
to you.
dog
Only
tag.
when it's Jews, it's okay.
Please
Ask
stop
this
shouting
fucking
at each
demon next
other.
to me wearing an IDF dog tag if she actually thinks Israel's
No,
actions are
bring them
justifiable.
home.
Do you
It's
see
to
me
bring the
rocking the
hostages
fucking
home.
An IDF dog tag.
The hostages
All right,
that you
you're talking
rightly
over
believe
each other.
belong in
All
the
right. You know what it
tunnels of
is.
Gaza.
I'm going to
know
give you
why
two.
it looks
I'm going to
that
let
way.
you two
That is
calm
the
down.
same
It's
size
pointless.
as the
We
IDF
cannot
dog
hear
tag.
you
You're
when you
wearing
talk
that.
over each
Well,
other.
the question is, okay, if the IDF isn't going to be the ones getting the hostage back, who will? Who will give the hostages back? If not the IDF. Huh.
Troll people.
Every time recently, I have someone
Okay.
from both sides
I'm wearing
on,
this
like
to
it goes
troll
like
people.
this.
I'm wearing this rusty necklace.
Please,
because
can you
there are
listen to me,
200 Israeli
Emily?
Civilians
Yeah,
in Gaza
All right,
right now.
can you
as
stop
hostages.
doing this to each
Hey,
other, please?
Emily,
Nobody
Emily,
can can
Emily,
understand a
can you
word
condemn the
either of
actions
you are
of
saying.
Israel?
Now let me come to Esther and James here. This is one of my problems.
No, I want to
actually.
hear if Emily condemns
No,
the
no,
actions of
Hassan,
Israel.
you
Why
will
don't you ask
please
her
let me
about that?
moderate the debate.
Why don't you ask her about
I don't condemn
30,000
the idea.
people
I've got
killed?
two
I
panelists
condemn
here
the
who've not
fact
had
that
a
on
word
October
yet.
Exactly,
7th,
because you're a
Please
terrorist.
stop
civilians from their
talking.
homes. And I think you're a terrorist. And I think you're a terrorist as well.
Okay, well, I'm not the one wearing.
Because
I'm
until
not
the
one
hostages
wearing
are home,
the
don't expect the war to be
insignia.
over.
Yeah, I know.
Bring
you don't
them
care about
home.
the hostages. If you
I
cared
love
about
how
the
you're
hostages,
condemning
you would
me.
be
You are
screaming at
exposing
Benjamin
your
Netanyahu.
own terrorism
Benjamin
on live
Netanyahu
television.
is the hostage
you
killer.
are exposing. You know.
Benjamin
excuse
Netanyahu
me.
has
You
killed
should
more
condemn
hostages
Hamas.
than
What do
Hamas
I
You need
have
to
you
be
think you're
condemning
achieving
Hamas
here?
for
Talking about.
not only oppressing the Palestinian people, but for spreading terrorism. I don't see your outrage at Hamas. Israel gave Gaza
All right,
back
listen,
in 2005,
I would like to, please.
and Hamas
You
has
don't
turned
think
it
you
into
both
a
please-
I think
terrorist
Hamas is the
haven.
lesser
instead of
Emily and
building a
Hasan,
safe
Hamas
can you
is the
please show
lesser
some
evil.
courtesy?
He's saying he keeps doing the Hamas is the lesser evil thing now. Oh no. You're a terrorist. This is good. This is good content. Yeah. I don't have any commentary. It's just
Hamas
To
is
the
the
other
lesser
panelists.
evil in comparison to Israel.
Can you please stop talking, both of you, and
You
let
hear
the
me?
other two panelists have a
You want a
say?
soundbite, Pierce? I'll give you
Give
a
them some
soundbite.
courtesy. Please. Some courtesy for your co-panelists here. Now, Esther, this is one of the problems I have with this whole debate, is that increasingly it just descends into a screaming match between pro-Palestinians and pro-Israelis.
And the biggest losers are the
She has
victims
no
of this
respect.
war. 33,000 dead Palestinians, over 1,500 dead Israelis. These are the biggest victims of this, because you're shouting at each other and nothing is getting, like, you're completely, forget having no courtesy for us, you're completely disrespecting actual victims of this conflict, which, by the way, didn't happen in a vacuum. And I think that's the most important thing to say about this. None of this happened in a vacuum. Of course, October the 7th was an atrocity, and it was completely unjustified. There was no justification for butchering people in the way that they did. But it didn't happen in a vacuum. A lot of the people that live in Gaza weren't even born at the time that Hamas came in power. So I really just, I despise this, you're a terrorist sympathizer, you're a genocide supporter, all of this, when really the people that we should be talking about deserve better.
Okay, James, on the wider point of these
I
protests.
love that. I love that whole both sides are you know what we need to do better. someone say something quick before I have to, before anyone asks me what we need to do this better. Okay.
I couldn't get to that part because I wanted to describe what the apartheid is, and Emily cut in immediately to chirp about some random.
Okay, you were both abusing each other. It was very unsatisfying.
It was very
let me ask James. James, on the protest.
Yeah, dude.
On the protest, look, I believe in the right to protest. That's an absolute bedrock of any democracy. But I don't believe in the right to support terror groups publicly, or to chant about support for Hamas, or to chant about Intifada, which is a violent uprising. Where's the
There is something really weak as well about, I feel like I've never in my life seen Hasan ascribe, like, treat people like Hamas as if they have any agency. I don't think I've ever seen him do that. It's always, it wouldn't have happened were it not for Israel. It wouldn't have happened were it not for Netanyahu. Actually, Netanyahu did it. Like, there's never any actual ascribing of agency to Hamas's leadership, because, again, regardless of what Israel does to Hamas, like, or to Palestinians, they have leaders. Those leaders have brains. They make decisions. They're not stupid people. They're pretty intelligent people, actually, I'd imagine. They have rationales, and I don't know why they're never treated like that, like people who made decisions. Like, someone clearly thought it was a good idea to do the October 7th operation, and if they did that, they would have had to assess what Hamas's military capabilities were, what the political situation was at the time, how far they must have estimated, at least, how far they were going to go. We know that they were seen before October 7th having training operations in simulated Israeli kibbutzim, so we know that they were preparing to go into those places. We know that they were that they would have had to think about what's the IDF response going to be, because in the first Intifada, again, the leaders, they anticipated the IDF response. They said, don't use lethal weapons for the most part, not Hamas, but the other ones, said don't use lethal weapons because we don't want to provoke overreactions and massacres from the IDF. They considered that. They made like strong, informed decisions. Hamas obviously knew that Israel was going to respond in some way. They can't force Israel to do anything, but they can obviously set the stage. They were pretty well prepared for it. They made that decision. They knew what the outcome would be. It's not like they spent any amount of time preparing bomb shelters for the civilians, or preparing evacuation routes, or preparing safe zones, or preparing means by which Hamas could separate themselves from the civilians. They didn't do any of that. Even though they knew a war was coming. They knew that they were going to instigate a full-on war. And by the same token, that Hamas doesn't force Israel to be obscene with their levels of collateral damage or with their acceptance of civilian casualties. Hamas didn't force Israel to stop the water supply. Hamas didn't force Israel to kill 7 aid workers on a road that was deemed safe for them. Hamas didn't force Israel to do any of that. So you can clearly condemn Israel for those actions. By the same token, though, Israel didn't force Hamas to do October 7th. He said he condemns October 7th a million times in this show. This question has gotten so old, it's frustrating. Again, he's in front of a new audience, Celia, and it's not actually, he's not a baby, okay? He knows a question like that is coming up. He knows to be prepared for it. If he can't give a clear and convincing answer, people are going to ask him the question again. And he did not give a very clear or convincing answer. That's no one else's fault but his.
For you with these?
I agree. I think we have to condemn what Hamas did, and I don't think the words that have been used so far have been strong enough. I mean, it was the worst thing we've seen in a very long time. It was disgusting, appalling, awful for everyone involved.
You see, I'll notice Piers isn't going to ask any of the other three. He's not going to ask them the same question again because they didn't equivocate in a really comedic way.
Also have a lot of sympathy, if not, I can't think of a bigger word, for the people of Gaza. It's awful, and I will agree with you. I do want a free Palestine, and I also want a free and successful Israel, but I don't want innocent people murdered. So yeah, you can't go to a protest and start shouting about support for Hamas. That's insane.
Isn't it ironic that something like this has become a haven for like the mentally unwell? You're talking about something as serious as a conflict in Israel and Gaza, and for some reason you have really uneducated people that are clearly 20 years ago would have been in an asylum.
That's you guys
supporting this openly, not even knowing the conflict, not even knowing the context of what they're supporting, and for some reason we even give it airtime. That's what upsets me. These people don't deserve airtime. Right?
Everyone is so triggered on both sides, on all sides, and rightly so. no, because a lot of terrible stuff has happened. So that's where the emotion is coming from. But really, I think we all want the same thing, and that is for innocent people to not be murdered or slain in the streets.
I'm sorry, but this guy, not so much. This guy's, two-stater. Okay, fine. I feel like this person here is like, you have to actually have an opinion on Israel and Palestine. You can't just spend your entire time allocation of the conversation talking about the conversation. It sounds like she's got the way that she's primed herself. I'm like, you've got something interesting to say about Israel and Palestine. You could tell something about the history, or about the two, about the PLO or Hamas, or about Netanyahu or the governments or the peace process. You could tell us something interesting about it the way you're talking about it. But it's just you need to follow up. I don't know what this person's opinion is at all.
I mean, look, Hasan.
But
hang on,
can I add
Emily,
something?
please. I'll come to you. Let me just ask Hasan. When you and Emily go at each other like you just did, nobody wins. I mean, no one can really understand a word you're saying because you're shouting over each other. You end up just calling each other terrorists. There's no sensible dialogue here. There's no constructive conversation. It's just two implacably opposed sides abusing each other. Do you understand that?
Yeah, listen, Piers, okay? This is going to always be a very heated discussion, okay? Having a conversation about how heated this discussion is utterly unproductive.
Bro, he just keeps on taking the words out of my mouth. Hasan, my guy, my brother. Wallahi.
Every single moment that we use on air, not talking about every single university building being desecrated, destroyed. The fact that we're having this conversation on the eve of hundreds of mass graves being unearthed right now in many different parts of Gaza, around hospitals that Israel had laid siege to, is disgusting. I agree.
I still need to figure out what GeoConfirmed were saying about those graves. They put an update up today. I remember yesterday, I can show you guys again what they were trying to claim. And it's true for at least one area that I was able to verify. Because I don't just look at, and I'm looking at these GeoConfirmed stuff. I actually want to see the pictures and see if the places that they're talking about are actually the same or not. But according to GeoConfirmed, this Nasser Hospital, which is, where's this from? 22. Okay. Yeah, it was Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, which Israel attacked on Khan Yunis, Nasser, precise. That Israel claimed they were going to do a precise and targeted operation on in late February. Then they call it was precise and targeted. Yeah. At Nasser Hospital, IDF achieves war goals with precision. Where did they? So this is what they claimed. Precise and limited operation. 25th February. So after the 25th of February, a few weeks later, Israel withdraws from Khan Yunis. Palestinians start returning, and they claim to be unearthing mass graves, presumably of people who were slaughtered by the IDF in a not so limited, not so precise operation. That seems to be the claim. Like here with Al Jazeera. So in the hospital courtyard, civil defense members and paramedics have retrieved 180 bodies buried in this mass grave by the Israeli military. The bodies include elderly children, women, and young men. So they're saying buried by the Israeli military. And what GeoConfirmed argued with this footage was that these graves, which were supposedly being discovered for the first time after Israel's operation, might have actually already been dug by Palestinians in late January. So this video here shows you them, because obviously hospitals were way beyond capacity and they had to just bury people outside the hospital grounds. So they're burying people. Remember, this news came out. Like, this is the Palestinians burying graves to put the dead in because there's nowhere else to put them. It's pretty tragic. If you look at that sign there, and you compare it to the Al Jazeera report, where is it? Here.
Early in the war, thousands of Palestinians recovered the...
Hey, stop. Yeah, in this Al Jazeera report, you can see... Where's the reporter? This it? Yeah, you see there. See the writing on that thing there where they're talking about uncovering graves that were supposedly filled up by the IDF in their operation. That little Arabic sign there, it's been charred a little bit, but this is actually the same from the Nasser hospital complex, but it's the same as here where the graves are actually being dug before the Israeli operation. See that? There. This is the same building. Like this bit here. It reads different, Sundowner. I don't think this part here is not different, is it? See that first word there? And the next bit? There's a more expanded view. There. It's because of the angle. It looks different from the start, but you can see there. I checked this a million times. Like, it's the same thing. There. See that? But that's not where things end, actually. Also, you can even see the surroundings as well. Like the kind of pinkish wall with the palm trees. Like, but that's not, yeah, pinkish wall, palm trees. It's the same building. But that's not where the story ends. Because now another claim is that when the IDF were operating in this hospital, apparently they dug up some of these graves to look for hostages. And there is also a question about whether or not apparently some of the bodies that were dug up in this exhumation might not have all been put there by Palestinians. It seems to be that some of the bodies had apparently like IDF markings on the body bags, and also that some people were bound and stripped, which suggests signs of torture, possibly sexual abuse. So I don't really know where the story's gone from there. Apparently there's like a Sky News investigation as well, but this report here from Al Jazeera is it's really, really shoddy because they're just acting as if this grave was like a novel, like a new thing that was just emerged after the Israeli operation. But obviously it's not, because we know that people were already getting buried in this area before the IDF went to the hospital. So I'll look at some investigations after this as well, because apparently Sky did something since yesterday, and Geo confirmed to have another update. But yeah, this mass grave thing is an absolute minefield. I haven't looked into other stuff though. Apparently, Geo confirmed seemed to believe that that Al Jazeera has done this before, that they've found graves that were dug by Palestinians, but then claimed that they were mass graves that were done in massacres by the IDF. So there'd be a grave that gets dug in like December, but then after an IDF operation in February, apparently the graves get dug up, and Al Jazeera says that this is the sign of that recent operation being a massacre. And I'm like, oh, okay. The word means center. Yeah, it's from the Nasser hospital complex. Let me see. It's on the map somewhere, isn't it? Because I looked this up on Google Earth as well. I was really skeptical of this claim, so I looked pretty hard at it. It was the building, was it here? Or was it here? It was that building there. You can see again with the palm trees in the building with the little red, white bit. Pink, white, I don't even know. Mubarak Hospital, Google Earth. You can see here. Whoa, it's so cute. Yeah. It's this building here. And this is the wall. These are the trees, and this is sort of where the graves were being dug up. Stream suggestions. Oh, the kidney facility. That's the building. Thank you, Sundowner. Center for Kidney Disease. And this is the video here from January. This was in January when Palestinians are digging the graves. There you go. So I was able to confirm at least that one. Geo confirmed does claim that this happened in other sites as well, although I just couldn't find... If the footage isn't from the same angle and there's not like a reference point, it's really difficult to actually make sure. So I'm not committing myself too hard. And also, this doesn't prove that no bodies were added to these grave sites by the IDF. They might very well have been, but this claim here, the way they're saying it, that they've just
Ryan Macbeth would be proud.
Thanks, Vovia X. Really appreciate that. This makes it sound like they just discovered this. Like the IDF does an operation in this hospital. The Palestinians go there after the IDF leave, and then they just like Butcha just discover this whole mass of bodies that weren't there before. That's not what happened, though. That doesn't seem to be the case. It seems to be that these graves were already there. Now, who was added to it? We don't know. Okay, there you go. That's where I am so far. We'll watch more about that after this.
I came on here, as I have done last time as well, and as I will probably do in the future as well, with one simple goal in mind, which is to address all of the misinformation that surrounds stuff like this. As far as the Crackhead Barbie thing goes, yeah, she's a random TikTok influencer who gives a shit about what she has to say. She's obviously doing it for clout. But the students over at Columbia, okay, the students that I have talked to at the Columbia University Apartheid Divest group, the students that I've talked to from Jewish Voice for Peace.
All right, Emily, let me just ask you the same thing I asked Hasan. When you guys scream at each other and call each other terrorists, it doesn't obviously achieve anything other than it becomes unintelligible to the audience. You know, is there not a better way we can have this conversation?
Funnily enough, correct. And funnily enough, I have the same exact answer as Hasan. My job here is to make sure that I'm debunking false narratives that Hasan is clearly spewing. My job here is to call out hypocrisy. And I just saw another one where he's saying that Crackhead Barney, whoever the hell that girl was, is a lunatic, but Aaron Bushnell, who lights himself on fire, is a hero. You can't pick and choose whatever fits your narrative. And I keep on repeating that over and over again, because the Palestinian movement will literally just take what they can get, spew all of the truth into their false narrative, spread misinformation, and then you say that we're the liars. You tell me I'm wearing an IDF dog tag. I'm wearing a bring them home for the hostages that you... No, it says bring them home.
You're using the hostages as a simple political tool to make propaganda in the West. Is quite disgusting. The protests that are happening in Israel right now...
I think she's saying it because she believes that the IDF are going to be the ones to get the hostages back. Actually, I'm curious. On October 8th, did Hamas actually make demands about what they wanted for those 250 hostages? I never actually saw that. Did Hamas make demands on October 7th for hostages exchange? For that many hostages, they would have wanted the entire prison system emptied. But the last hostage deal Hamas rejected. Quite a few are believed to be dead now.
Captivity are a political tool.
And those protests,
what?
You are using humans in captivity as a political tool. It's so obvious.
Why, Hasan? Why are you dehumanizing the hostages? Because I have no problem admitting the Palestinians deserve better.
Not.
I feel terrible.
You're using them as a political pawn.
I can say that.
If you cared about the hostages, you would be in Tel Aviv right now
using
alongside.
Let me bring in James. Let me bring in James, please.
I'm sorry that I can't.
Please, let me bring in James.
I agree with both of you.
Sorry, can you please, when I say stop talking, please stop talking. We've got 4 people here. James.
If anyone is using hostages, surely it's Hamas, Hasan. How can you say that? How can you use that argument? That's a crazy thing to say. It's Hamas that have taken these people from their homes,
tens of thousands of people in Israel. There are currently tens of thousands of Israeli citizens right now in the streets of Israel, in the streets of Tel Aviv, outside of Benjamin Netanyahu's house, protesting every single day. What are they protesting? They're protesting for Benjamin Netanyahu to facilitate a ceasefire with Hamas so that they can actually bring the hostages home. That is precisely the number.
But Hamas is rejecting the ceasefires to bring hostages home. Does he not know that? They managed to get one hostage exchange out of them, but since then, was April 14th the last one? Also, I'm pretty sure most Israelis... Wait, well, hang on. What's the Israeli polling on the war now? Polling, war... Pretty sure the ones who are protesting Netanyahu on the whole, let me see. Well, in March, 75% of them backed the Rafah operation. So I think the majority of them who are protesting against Netanyahu are pushing for him to do the war and get the hostages back that way, not for ceasefire, but okay.
Who here is
of
using
the family
the
members of the hostages?
They're rejecting a temporary one, yeah. Although even the temporary one, if you look at the way that they word the temporary one, when they say temporary, they also mean temporary in the sense of, let me find out the wording of it. Like when people like Qatar and the United States were talking about temporary ceasefire, they were talking about temporary, but trying to use that temporary ceasefire as a way to have a proper agreement that it makes it lasting. That was the difference between the Security Council votes on immediate and unconditional ceasefire, which just means Israel leaves Gaza and Hamas does whatever the fuck they want, and the other kind of ceasefire, which is the temporary ceasefire, so that there can be hostage exchanges and then also talks over how to keep that ceasefire in place. And generally that means that Hamas has to give up power to someone else. Hopefully not Israel, right? Because I think it's just kind of delusional to think that Hamas are going to get to keep on governing Gaza after this. Like, there's no way, right? I think that's kind of delusional. Like, they're never going to be trusted again to not do another October 7th. If they do, even if they do that, if Israel just withdraws from Gaza and allows Hamas to stay in power, what do you think they're going to do to the border, to Gaza? They're going to blockade it even harder. They're going to restrict even more humanitarian aid. They're going to restrict more money. Remember that whole thing, Netanyahu allowing Qatari money to get into Gaza, and people being really angry with him for that? Well, that was humanitarian money. At least it was labeled in that way, even though it turns out some of it was used for October 7th. So now it's just going to be that money's just not going to go in at all. So, like, are we really just going to go back to status quo? Is that what the demand is? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Who
and
is
if
using
anyone
the
on this panel was being even a little bit honest, they would recognize the reality that, listen, just listen.
You didn't listen to my question.
Listen to what I'm saying, and you will understand, perhaps, what I'm trying to imply here.
That's very patronizing.
Utilizing the hostages. Yeah, I am being patronizing. I don't know who the f you are, and you're over here chirping all the way from London about Palestine and doing a both sides are fine type bullshit.
Oh, Hasan, this isn't your chat. You can't talk like, oh God, that is, he just gave up on the mainstream appeal, didn't he? London, what, so doing it from West Hollywood's fine? What? Can you imagine watching this as an impartial viewer, like a Piers viewer, not knowing who any of these people are? God, Hasan would look unhinged. I feel like he was making reasonably good points at the beginning, but damn, he got triggered. He flipped. He's gone one guy mode. He's got one guyed by a real human being. Oh no. And he can't ban him either. He just has to, he's got no chat going based.
You're talking about how you want to free Palestine, but also simultaneously, both sides got a lot going on. Shut the up. You don't know anything.
Is that not Hasan? If he wants a free Palestine but also a free Israel, you would dislike Hamas because Hamas are rejectionists, just like you would dislike Netanyahu. Oh God, I think Hasan's maybe realized that, and I've seen this from, I did not expect to see this from his audience members, but because Hasan doesn't full-throatedly support Hamas and support killing civilians and all that, because he doesn't really do that in the same way that people like the deprogrammers do, I've noticed that there is actually a bit of dissatisfaction from the far left fringes of his community. They think that his attempts to appeal to a more mainstream audience with this, like, I'm basically a tanky when I'm talking to my chat, but as soon as I end up in mainstream media, I become a social democrat who really just wants healthcare and unions and shit like that. I think he's maybe giving up on that approach, that like triangulating approach, and he's now probably going to realize that actually, if you just go full-throated, like even a two-stater who wants Palestinian sovereignty is not good enough, then that might actually help him to consolidate just a more extreme audience, and all the moderates can fuck off.
Anything, okay? I don't give a shit about what your perspective is.
I agree
Hasan doesn't
with quite
like
a lot
what
of
you
the
have
things
to
you're saying,
say, so
Hasan.
you're wrong. It's not. It's Hasan's way or the highway.
I mean,
let the
you are,
pink-haired
you
guy
are.
speak.
There is no
Clever
both
you
sides
are.
on a genocide. Is there a
Really
both sides on a
clever.
genocide? There is no both
Well,
sides.
the thing is, it's interesting you should mention the
Really?
hostages.
What
There
is
is
in the
no both
Hamas
sides
charter?
and
They want
apartheid.
a Jewish genocide, but that's okay. But
the
a
thing
Jewish
is,
genocide is okay.
if you're talking about the well-being of the if you're talking about the well-being of the hostages,
Even a two-stayer, if that's so pro-Palestine. Yeah, sorry, Eduardo Perez. In the real world, okay, you mincing sack of cum. Yes, wanting a Palestinian state now is a pro-Palestine position. It's more pro-Palestine than anything that's happened in the last 75 years, you retard. Palestinians have never had a state. Some people believe they shouldn't have a state. Some people, like most of the powerful people in the world, just say they deserve a state and then never do anything about it. Yes, believing that Palestinians genuinely deserve a state is a exceptional position right now, because most people would say that if your leadership declares 4 wars for all the land, loses all of them, then you deserve nothing. That's what most people would say at a statesman level. Trying to salvage a Palestinian state along the lines of 67 borders after all this, that would be an immensely unprecedented effort. It's the right thing to do, but the political will to achieve just that would be absolutely insane. But because some people, apparently that's just like pie in the sky now because of settlements, but the same people who say that will say, oh, you know, if Hamas if they keep on going and the more civilians die, Hezbollah will get involved eventually. Hezbollah, and then Iran, they might fire 400 missiles next time. Maybe they'll actually kill that 10-year-old Bedouin child. Maybe, and then Israel just won't use the nukes. They just won't do it. It's just not going to happen. Apparently that's more reasonable. Or if we BDS Israel, then everyone who lives there will give up their will to fight for their entire existence, like somehow, because they have less money. Anyway.
What sense did it make for the IDF to flatten about 70% of Gaza? Because I completely agree. Bring the hostages home. If you look at Gaza, the topography of Gaza right now, it looks like a pancake. So I'm sorry, this whole argument of Hamas using them as human tools, fine, but the IDF has also been using it to continue that campaign. If you were told that, if God forbid, if your relative was one of the hostages and you saw what's happening right now, and I met someone whose mother is a hostage, and he said he didn't want his mother and her being taken to be used in the name of violence. Right now, he's sitting at home wondering, okay, what is the logic of trying to bring my mother home when you flattened Gaza? Please explain that to us.
So, can I pose a question
you might very well pull those hostages from under.
Okay, let Emily respond to that.
Everyone wants to criticize the IDF's response, but nobody wants to tell me what should Israel be doing to retaliate October 7th, eradicate Hamas from preventing another October 7th, and bring the hostages home.
I have an idea.
Do you have a solution?
I have an idea. Do not flatten Gaza and potentially pull your own hostages up from under the rubble, like have been done with thousands of Palestinians. That's a good idea. Yeah. Have you found any of them under the rubble?
So you're saying that you don't have an answer.
That is the answer.
So you
don't kill your own hostages.
But you're quick to condemn the IDF.
She's a little bit closer to my position, I would say. I think a good way to articulate that would be Israel puts itself up as the bastion of Western values in the Middle East, the moral army and all that. Well, don't just force, because apparently Israel used to be very concerned about collateral losses. It's like, try and just uphold that. Be more, like, you can take out your Hamas rocket launchers and your Hamas military stockpiles and all that, but just be careful and don't think that just because, and don't build these standards where you see like 60 people dying in a single strike in exchange for a couple of like a commander, a couple of fires and a couple of bits of tunnel. Like maybe just be a bit more conservative in your approach to military operations, given that there are hostages there. You can say something like that. And also don't turn off the water, you freaks. Like, Jesus Christ. Yeah, you could do stuff like that. So, But it's funny that she's also saying like bring them. I don't know. Yeah, she hasn't really articulated the idea, because I wonder if she thinks that Israel should be doing any military operation or not. But I don't know. It's just so this person, this pro-Israel person is like pretty unhinged and pretty just like desperate for emotional appeals and only speaking in sound bites. I feel like Hasan has a really good opportunity to come out looking good in this, but he really sacked it with the whole good both sides bullshit. Where the f are you? And doing the English accent. Oh God, not good.
But you don't have an answer.
I also
How
have
about
an
not killing the
answer.
hostages?
Very interesting.
I have an answer.
Thank you for proving my point.
It's called the
Yes,
dissolution
Hasan.
of the apartheid regime. That's what it's called. Dissolve the apartheid regime.
So what would you like to
allow
see happen,
Palestinians
Hasan?
breathing room. Do you not understand the English language?
We're
Dissolve
delayed.
the
It's delayed.
apartheid regime.
You need a
Thing is, dissolve the apartheid regime doesn't actually tell you clearly what you want. I can say dissolve the apartheid regime, and you know how I would do that? Is I would withdraw everything from the West Bank and Gaza and give them a state. That would technically be no more apartheid regime. But is that what you mean? I don't think that's what you mean. Do you mean voting rights? If everyone got voting rights from the river to the sea, and it's all just one country, that would be dissolving the apartheid regime. If you got rid of all the Israelis, that would dissolve the apartheid regime, because the only people left would be Arabs. There are quite a lot of different ways you can interpret the dissolve the apartheid regime. Be clear. Yeah.
Xanax, first of all. You need a Xanax. Okay, so should Israel do
I'm
to
sorry,
the West Bank what they did to
Palestinians
Gaza?
have been ruthlessly slaughtered by the
Should
Israeli
Israel
state.
give
It makes
back
me a
the
little
land so
upset
that it can
when
turn
someone is
into another
defending that.
Gaza? Is that what you'd like to see? Another terrorist haven launching rockets all day instead of turning into Singapore? Because that's what they did in 2005.
Wait, hold on. What is
works.
Singapore?
The
The West
billions of
Bank.
dollars in
Hold on,
aid
is
they
the
turned
West
into
Bank
building
Singapore?
tunnels. Is that what you'd
Wait,
like
wait,
to
wait,
see?
wait.
Bombing,
I don't know.
who's
Have I
bombing
gone
Singapore
deaf?
every day?
Sorry,
What,
Emily, is the
Singapore
West
an
Bank
open-air
supposed to be
prison?
Singapore?
What are you talking about?
Is the West Bank supposed to
The
be Singapore?
West Bank received. The West Bank has a port. They can import and export. Israel gave them a great piece of land. They received billions of dollars in aid, not only from
Israel
the
gave
U.S.,
them a great
but
piece of
Israel
land?
gave. Are you
No.
mad? They had a chance to rebuild, but they spent the last 15 plus years crying.
She meant Gaza, not West Bank. It's interesting though, because when Hamas, I don't know why I keep doing that. It's not even like a Freudian slip. It's just when Hasan says, just dissolve the apartheid regime. But usually, but I guess Hasan would also say that the unilateral pullout of Gaza was a bad thing. It was a bad thing because it had no plan for who was going to take power afterwards. It had no assurances. It had no assurances of joint sovereignty with the West Bank because they just threw a bunch of settlers into the West Bank in the same year, more than were taken out of Gaza. But that would also suggest that clearly unilateral withdrawal does not help anyone. It didn't help the Gazans. It didn't help the Israelis. And they're not going to do it in the West Bank. So that also means, are you supporting a negotiated settlement or negotiated dissolution of the apartheid? Who should concede what in that situation? And again, they're just never going to hear that kind of elaboration here. If two states is the pro-Palestine position, what's the neutral position? Occupation forever and no state. Two states is not the only pro-Palestine position. It's just one of them. It is a pro-Palestine position. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of this person is a. She's literally gift wrapped for Hasan to look good, but he kind of threw it, talking to the pink-haired guy. Okay.
Wow.
That they don't have
okay.
enough land because there is never enough land for them instead of rebuilding. But that's okay. Build terrorist tunnels. Don't build hotels and don't rebuild
Israel
civilization.
has
Just build
not
terrorist
allowed
tunnels to keep hostages
Palestinians
in.
to have a nation state that they deserve by international law since the inception of the Israeli nation state. What you are saying is insane to me. The fact that you brought up the last 15 years as Palestinians crying is disgusting.
Oh, I have one more question.
You are a disgusting little monster who thinks that not offering contiguity to the Palestinians in the form of a state, which is under international law, is just simply Palestinians crying.
One question.
Okay?
This West Bank
don't want a
Singapore.
two-state
Hold on.
solution.
Again, contiguity. The rejection of Clinton parameters or Camp David was not to do with contiguity. And contiguity was there in the Clinton parameters. I think the sticking points were what? Refugees in Jerusalem, it seemed to be. Anyway.
West Bank,
a one-state
Singapore.
solution that eradicates the Israelis, which is not an option.
Fine. This West Bank, Singapore, what place does the settlements play in that? Please paint a picture of how the West Bank of Singapore, or whatever, Singapore of the West Bank, how does this illegal settlements fit into that?
I think you're completely missing the picture.
Just explain to me how the settlements fit into that picture.
A piece of land. I'm explaining it.
Okay, I'm listening.
The picture is they got a great piece of land to turn into society. Instead of turning it into civilized society,
Who did?
Israel gave the land to Gaza. They
So then why
withdrew.
the
They
Israeli
removed
settlers?
Israelis
It's not Israel's
from
land
their
to give.
homes.
It's not Israel's land to give.
It
is not Israel's land to give.
There are no Jews or Israelis. There are no settlements in Gaza.
In the West Bank.
They gave it to
in the West
the
Bank.
Palestinians.
They're not in the West Bank.
Oh God, she misspoke about the West Bank and now everyone's confused. Oh no.
I'm speaking about Gaza and now
I'm
you're
asking
changing
about
the
West
narrative.
Bank because I was interested in knowing about Singapore.
I'm telling you that if Israel pulls out completely from the West Bank, if Israel pulls out from the West Bank, you can bet your ass it turns into the next Gaza. The world does not need two Gazas because one Gaza has already caused enough damage. If, however, Gaza decides to demand
every
that
argument
Hamas
with Israel
removes
is
himself
about
from
some
power,
hypothetical.
and they can have democracy.
Israel has to do a
then yes,
genocide
there's
because if
potential
Israel
for a
doesn't do a
two-state
genocide,
solution.
then the Gaza
There's no genocide. The only genocide is the Hamas charter that wants to eradicate the Jews.
Defensive genocide.
You know, it's interesting the word genocide.
There is no
because-
genocide.
Hang on, it's interesting the word.
There's no
Hang
genocide
on. I would love to get a word in, please. Interesting the word
God.
genocide, because I've listened to all this fractious debate, everyone talking over each other.
No.
The truth is that actually only one side has publicly said that they wish to pursue a genocide, and that is Hamas. Hamas, after October the 7th, through their official spokesman on camera, said they wanted to do it again and again and again. That is the purest articulation of a genocide.
Why is he? It's also because their charter has never been formally renounced. The PLO renounced their parts of the charter that call for the destruction of Israel. Hamas did not know such thing. It's been a while since we looked at the Hamas charter. Hang on. Where they cite the protocols of the elders of Zion, for one. Where's the one about trees? The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews, when the Jew will hide behind stones and trees. The stones and trees will say, "O Muslims, O Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." Only the Crackhead tree, evidently a certain kind of tree, would not do that because it is one of the trees of the Jews. Yeah, the chart is pretty unhinged. So they mention the protocols in here? The Zionist plan is limitless. After Palestine, the Zionists will aspire to expand from the Nile to the Euphrates. When they will have digested the region they overtook, they will aspire to further expansion, and so on. Their plan is embodied in the protocols of the elders of Zion, and their present conduct is the best proof of what we are saying. This was shortly after they gave up the Sinai for peace with Egypt. Oh, okay. Huh. They even acknowledge that here. That's how incoherent is that? The treacherous Camp David agreement from Egypt, but then also the Zionists want from the Nile to the Euphrates, even after they just referenced the period where it was given up.
Imaginable. And the one thing I never hear from the pro-Palestinian side is
really think
what Israel was actually. Hang on. No, don't interrupt me.
So one
I haven't asked you a
official,
question yet.
One Hamas guy.
Sorry, I need to ask you a question.
You're being a ridiculous person.
You're
being a ridiculous person.
Don't interrupt the moderator, Hasan. It looks really bad.
I'm just saying, nobody ever tells me.
What do you mean, one Hamas guy? Do you think that's the only Hamas guy who believes that? It's in their charter, you like, come
Israeli
on.
officials, even on your show, have said we should keep doing what we have been doing to Gaza over and over again. How does that not register in the same genocidal intent? If you think what that dude was saying, which was, by the way, ridiculous what he was saying, the Hamas official was saying, is that we're going to do October 7th over and over again.
But he said it.
We are justified in doing it over and over again. Yes, I find that to be abhorrent. However, what you fail to recognize is that's the genocidal intent, but not Amalek. That's the genocidal intent, but not saying.
This Amalek thing is so, oh God. Well, I guess since this is a segment, we should have a look at it. People say that Amalek is a reference to, what is it they say again? Remember what Amalek, as the South Africa case, ICJ. ICJ, Israel, full. Where's the PDF? Summary of the order. Where's the document? I had it up. Oh. Amalek. It's a really interesting thing. It tells you a lot about language, this thing. Remember what Amalek did to you, says our Holy Bible, we do remember. And the relevant biblical passage reads as follows. Now, go attack Amalek and prescribe all that belongs to him. Spare no one, but kill alike men and women, infants and sucklings, oxen and sheep, camels and asses. Now, when people say Amalek, do they always mean the literal biblical reference? Or, if that were the case, Why is there literally an Amalek monument at The Hague that has the exact same quote? Remember what Amalek did to you, never forget. When they say this, which is obviously a Holocaust thing, Holocaust memorial, are they saying to genocide all the Germans and all their cattle and asses and infants and sucklings? Well, no, Amalek is, it seems to be that in terms of the way that the word is actually used in practice by Jewish people, it's a reference to people who have done atrocious things to them, i.e. the Nazis, or in this case, Hamas on October 7th. But yeah, this is the whole problem with basically every quote in here, is like it's either out of context or they literally just omit parts where they do distinguish between civilians and militants, even though they say they didn't, or it omits parts where they clarify that they're talking about Hamas, like literally in the next paragraph or in both paragraphs on each side. Yeah, this is horseshit anyway.
We are fighting human animals, and that's why we have to cut off their food.
This was from Yoav Galant. Was this one of the ones that they said could actually be seen as plausibly? Yeah, because of the no water. Yeah, I think this was the actually really bad one. No food, no water, no fuel. Now, they turned on 2 water pipes out of the 3 within a couple of weeks. One of them in the north stayed off for 6 months. So whoever ordered that, I'm pretty sure should be in jail, because that is a pretty clear violation of IHL. Act accordingly, 452. What's the full quote here, though? I forgot. Times of Israel. That's just the tiny blurb of it. Is there a full statement? So is this not genocidal? The problem with genocidal quotes is that, remember in Rwanda when they said cut down the tall trees? That doesn't sound like genocide at all, but that was literally a call to murder people. It was a call to murder people. It was a call to murder Tutsis. So you can incite genocide with very light language. You can also not be inciting genocide with very inflammatory language. The quotes are only there to supplement actions. The quotes in and themselves don't really mean anything. So this, for example, imposing a complete siege, no food, no water, no fuel, this is a violation of IHL. Not the electricity or the fuel. There's no law where you're obligated to allow electricity or fuel into a territory that's attacking you. But water, yes, you do actually have to allow water to go in. Same with food. It's actually an obligation to allow the food to facilitate the movement of food if you're occupying an area like they are in Gaza. So, and the human animals, again, that could be genocidal, but it depends. Is he talking about, are Hamas the human animals, or is everyone in Gaza the human animals? Like, again, you would have to look at the actions, you'd have to look at what policies are in place, you'd have to look at what soldiers are doing on the ground. And again, when we talk about the threshold of genocide, genocide is not just when lots of civilians die. That's not what genocide is. Also, like the quote sniping, that's what the stupid thing about it is because if you do quote sniping is the same thing that Zionists use to try to argue that the Palestinians wanted to commit a genocide in 48. I think it was Traveling Israel did this, didn't he? In his video about me. He did the same thing. He did the Amalek version, the South Africa version of quote sniping, only in 48 from the Arab end. Because those Arabs did say some pretty mad, those leaders. Hajj al-Husseini, our fundamental condition for cooperating with Germany was a free hand to eradicate every last Jew from Palestine and the Arab world. I asked Hitler for a explicit undertaking to allow us to solve the Jewish problem in a manner befitting our national and racial aspirations and according to the scientific methods innovated by Germany in the hands of its Jews. The answer I got was, the Jews are yours. This is while Hajj al-Husseini was literally helping to recruit Muslims in Eastern Europe to join the SS. He wasn't inspiring Hitler to do the Holocaust, though. That's a Netanyahu line. That one's false. This quote is real as well. We will have to initiate total war, murder, wreck, and ruin, everything standing in our way, be it American, English, or Jewish. This will be a war of extermination and momentous massacre. This one is obviously based on It's called Azam's genocidal threat. But again, if you know anything about this guy, the context of this quote is him warning against the idea of a war happening at all. Talking about the Tatar massacres and the Crusader Wars, I think the further context is saying he's saying we defeated the Crusaders, we'll defeat the Israelis as well. But if you look at the actual Arab actions in the 48 war, there were definitely massacres. There were massacres that took place against medical convoys. There were massacres that took place against over 100 surrendered people in Kfar Etzion. Yeah, there were massacres when the Arabs had the upper hand, which wasn't very often, but they did commit massacres occasionally and even rapes. So were they waging a genocidal war? Not really. There's no evidence of that. There's no evidence that there was any coordinated goal from any Arab leader, even despite this rhetoric, because in war, people say insane. That's just what they do. So when the Arab armies were actually operating, it seemed to be that their goals were to capture territory, which is what they did. Like the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Jordanians' goal was really to avoid fighting the Zionists as much as they could. They captured East Jerusalem and the West Bank. The Syrians seemed to do that as well. The Lebanese just didn't. They barely wanted to fight, let alone commit a genocide. So Hajime al-Husseini might have wanted to commit a genocide because he was mental, but he didn't really have an army, and there's not really ever been any leaked or discovered documentation of him ordering what limited militant forces he had control over in that direction. So, and this is what any honest historian will say, is there's not really any good evidence that there was a genocidal intent in the Arab forces in 48, even though you have the quotes these quotes are worse, right? These quotes are worse than anything any of the Israelis have said. War of extermination. I don't recall Netanyahu or Gallant saying anything like that, or total war, wreck, murder, and ruin. The Arabs would not suffice with preventing partition, but would continue fighting until the Zionists were annihilated and the whole of Palestine became a purely Arab state. Again, he might have very well wanted that. He quite clearly seemed to want that. But whether or not there was any general direction to the militants to pursue that goal didn't seem to be the case. So you can actually say pretty insane without demonstrating an actual concrete dolus specialis to commit the act. So,
food, their water, and their electricity. That was Defense Minister Yoav Gallant
There we
who said
go with
that.
the lies
Benjamin
again.
Netanyahu
You're saying Israel
routinely
cuts
talked
off their
about this over and over
electricity.
again.
They don't even
Israeli
provide
interior
their
security,
electricity.
Israeli,
You're saying they cut off their water. They don't cut off their water. You are spewing lies on national television.
Can you? I'm talking
I think so. Hang on. Again, you're talking over each other. Some of the comments.
Army that
there's no doubt,
aid
Emily.
To people they're at war with.
Some of the comments.
Israel is
no, Piers, I'm not letting him spew misinformation.
Karen country on the fucking planet. I swear to God.
Israel is the most Karen country on the planet. Oh God, Hasan.
Again.
This is pointless. We're getting nowhere.
No, because
Thank
he's
you.
Did Yoav Gallant not say that?
Israel's cutting off electricity, water, and aid.
Did Defense Minister Yoav Gallant say we are fighting human animals or not? Answer that question. Did Defense Minister Yoav Gallant say we are fighting human animals and we have to cut off their electricity, cut off their food, cut off their water?
Okay.
But they didn't cut off the food imports weren't cut off though. Food imports were going into Gaza. I don't know. The war is paid for by the PA and controlled by Israel? I think so. So Israel controls 3 pipes that go into Gaza. It makes up 9% of Gazan water. They cut off all 3 of them. 2 of them were restored by the end of October. So a couple of weeks. And the 3rd one was restored just recently, 6 months into the war. They're not getting invited back. No, they might get invited back. What are you talking about? But again, that Gallant quote could very well be an indication of genocidal intent. It's not impossible. It's not impossible at all. But people are using it like it's this silver bullet that as soon as a war happens, and all it takes is one person to say one mad thing, and then suddenly the war becomes a genocide. That's not how it works at all. That's why the ICJ uses standards like plausibility. That's why they apply a low standard to plausibility, because people can communicate genocidal intent in loose ways, or they can be very inflammatory in ways that have nothing to do with genocidal intent, as with the Arabs in 48. Like they were much more inflammatory than the Israeli leaders are now, but they didn't have genocidal intent, not demonstrably. So, well, what can I say? You know, I'm not a propagandist.
Yeah, the
not
slight
I'm going to cut off.
Israel
I'm going to cut off this
provides
debate.
79% of their electricity. The rest is Hamas.
I'm going to cut off the
That's
debate
not
because
Israel.
we're getting.
Is it possible that cutting off was an act of genocide, but not the whole war? No. Cutting off water, depending on why. Now, if you cut off the water, again, 9% of Gaza's water, if they turned those pipes off because they wanted Gazans to die of thirst, just any regular old Gazan, that would have been an act of genocide, yeah. Even if it failed, because it's only 9% of the water. If they did it because they wanted to do what Israel seems to have been doing for the last 75 years, which is to say that if this community attacks us, we are going to attack that community 100 times harder to set an example so that other people in other parts of the region don't do the same thing, then that wouldn't be genocide. That would be a violation of IHL. It would be leveraging atrocities, or leveraging, what do you call it, like punitive action as part of some like military deterrent or some bullshit, right? That's even if you disagree with that cause, and I don't think you should violate IHL to set an example. We're not in the medieval age anymore. That's still not genocide, though. It's the intent is what matters.
Absolutely nowhere. But I appreciate everybody joining me. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay. What an incredible conversation. I wonder how Hasan was received in the comments. I've never read the comments. What is this rubbish, Piers? What the hell is Piers Morgan thinking, putting this woman in his show? Cutting as soon as Jewish Voice for Peace is mentioned. No one gives a f about Jewish Voice for Peace. They're like... they're a pretty small organization as far as I know. They don't represent the majority of the Jewish community. Like if they wanted, like half the time, if you look on their Instagram posts or their things, like they call themselves Jewish Voice for Peace, but then they also call for intifada or say no justice, no peace. I'm like, okay, which one is it then, right? I don't know. They're a really strange organization. They're just like, again, if Jewish people want to take that position, they can, and you know, all the power to them, but I feel like people act as if Jewish Voice for Peace are just this kind of like, as if they're like, I don't know, they're treated like tokens, I think, is the way I see it. Didn't their org have to admit that most members aren't Jewish? Yep. So I've heard. The evidence for that is, it's difficult to find because the only people who talk about JVP in that way are like ADL and shit. Again, because they're not a very big group. They're not a very influential group. Why was Hasan edited when speaking about Jewish Voice for Peace? Sharp cut. Oh, I guess the editing is cutting off Hasan Piker uncensored. Disgusting little monster. The fake blonde is a Karen. Piers cutting off Hasan. Was Hasan not the one interrupting people? Am I going crazy? Okay. Understandably lost his temper. Oh well, we got the Hasan fans in here. Emily ought to keep Aaron Bushnell's name out of her mouth. Oh God.